I think we're just about ready to get started. So, real quick, my name is Tom Berard. I am a first-year student here at MIT, and I'm one of the student organizers for ClimateCAP this year. We are super excited to have you join us for this session. We're going to be walking through inroads, which is something that MIT, in collaboration with its other partners, is very, very proud of. And I'd like to introduce our facilitator for today, Crystal Noisseau. Crystal is the Associate Director of the MIT Climate Pathways Project, which has engaged in sustainability initiatives with more than 15,000 leaders in governments, businesses, and civil societies across the policy ecosystem. So please join me in welcoming Crystal.
Thank you very much.
And I hope you have a great time with the intro session.
Thank you. Okay, we wanted to do a little pre-post for this session. So, we're going to have like a mini word cloud, and then we might have more folks join, and so our post data might be a little skewed. But go ahead and use the QR code up here, and just give me like one word or two. You can use two words, but use a hyphen between them, like in the session this morning, to just share how you're feeling about climate change before we do anything else today. How are you feeling?
I think you need to turn on the
Oh, that was, I don't know what that was. It's activated, and where's it?
Yeah.
Everybody gets a QR.
Did everyone get the QR code?
It looks like the poll is locked though.
It is not
so
on.
it needs to be turned on.
Okay. Let me go back to that. Activate. And then the QR code. Nope. Not functioning. Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Yes?
Nope, not quite. Nope.
No? All right, we're gonna have to scrub it because there it is. It's activated.
Web voting? You turn on web voting? You just shout it out if you want.
Yeah, you can just shout it out.
It won't be anonymous.
Shout it out. It won't be anonymous, but shout it out. But I do want to get this working. Locked. Unlock. Literally have never had this happen before. But there's a first time for everything. Okay. It's activated.
Yeah, I'll do you a favor. This is how we used to do it. This is how we used to do the word cloud. You shout out the word.
Shout out the word, and you put the cloud on the board.
What's a word?
How are we feeling?
Whoa. You like excited. What else?
Cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
Cautiously optimistic.
I know, 2 words.
What else?
Discouraged.
Discouraged.
Anxious.
What else?
We're yelling out how we feel about climate change because our polling app is not working. So we're going old school.
Controversial.
Okay.
What else?
Skeptical.
Okay, what else?
Uninformed.
Okay.
What else?
You can upvote something too.
We can? Is it working?
No. I mean, you can like.
Is that what you were looking for?
I think that's great.
Okay.
Okay, excited, optimistic, discouraged, anxious, controversial, skeptical, and uninformed. Okay, I'm going to ask you this again at the end of today's session. So thank you so much for selecting this workshop to be in. My name is Crystal Noisseau. I'm the Senior Associate Director of the Pathways Project. We're using interactive simulations, including En-ROADS that we'll be experiencing here today, to advance evidence-based climate policy among present-day decision makers in the public and the private sector. And we also know that this tool that you're going to see is in use in curricula across business and management schools, as well as many, many other schools across the world in almost 200 different institutions. So what you're seeing here is a climate solutions simulator that is co-developed with Climate Interactive and MIT Sloan. Climate Interactive is a nonprofit that was born out of MIT Sloan, and we work together very closely with them on this model. It's a system dynamics model, so it's bringing together the atmosphere and the biosphere and the land and the economy and society together so that we can test out our climate solution ideas, and when we tug on something in the system, it's going to tug on everything else like it should in the real world. So we're trying to have a simulated experiment so that you can test out your ideas first in a safe environment before really maybe advocating for those out in the real world. It is developed using the best available science. So we're using data sources like the IPCC, the International Energy Agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN, the World Bank, the latest, greatest peer-reviewed science. And the model itself is fully documented. So you can go to the model's technical reference. You can see the model's entire structure. All of the equations, parameters, assumptions that we're making are documented for you to explore. All of the scientific citations are there for you to explore. And as a user of the model, you can even challenge and change our key assumptions. So you can access the simulation's key assumptions about a variety of factors, everything from the Earth system, something like climate sensitivity, economic impact of climate change, energy, carbon capture, removals. There's all different assumptions that we have to make because all models are wrong. Some models are useful, and in order to keep it useful, we want to make sure that we're very transparent about it and also very flexible. So it allows you to challenge and change the baseline assumptions before you would even get started in the simulation. Freely available, online, runs in any laptop or a tablet in a browser. And when you land on En-ROADS, you can actually change the language. So right now it is available in 22 different languages, making it very accessible. We have nearly 1,000 ambassadors around the world that are trained to use it. So wherever you're coming from, there's probably folks in your neck of the woods who are trained En-ROADS ambassadors. And you can find them on Climate Interactive's website, and you can have workshops done in your community. What you're looking at here, the setup of En-ROADS when you land here, you're looking at En-ROADS baseline scenario. And the baseline scenario is basically, where could the world be headed if we don't take any more climate action than we already have today? So we're only talking about global implemented policy. We're not talking about pledges that countries are making or promises that Fortune 500 companies are making. We're saying implemented policy. It is a global simulator, so what we're looking at is anything that we simulate here together today, and I'll be asking for your ideas, and you're going to tell me what to do. I'm just going to be the facilitator and the ambassador between you and the tool. We're really looking at a global average. What if the world did this thing to this extent on average? What would that mean for this global climate challenge? Across the top, you're always going to have a double graph view, and then you can track the temperature in 2100 here over on the right. So if we start from the left-hand side and we look at global sources of primary energy, you're going to see global sources of primary energy from 2000 to 2100. So the horizontal axis in En-ROADS is always showing you 100 years. And then, of course, the vertical axis is going to change depending on what we're exploring. So here we see global sources of primary energy. We see coal in brown on the bottom. We see oil in red. We see fossil gas in blue. We see the renewables, which are modeled separately, but shown together in green. So this is the solar, the hydro, the wind, the geothermal. We see bioenergy in pink, and then baby blue on top is nuclear. So you can see how that energy, those global sources of primary energy, that demand is growing throughout through the end of the century. Over here, you're seeing greenhouse gas net emissions. En-ROADS has hundreds and hundreds of graphs and charts and maps for you to explore depending on what you need. I'm going to switch this to the stacked graph of greenhouse gas net emissions. So again, we're looking at 2000 to 2100, and we're seeing the relative contribution of decisions we're making here in green about land use and land use change. In gray, we're seeing the contribution from fossil fuels, from burning fossil fuels for energy. In gold here are the fluorinated gases, things that we're using in industry, things that we're using to keep things cool, our refrigerants, our air conditioners, our freezers, our dehumidifiers. In baby blue, we're seeing methane, so we're seeing this from agriculture, from industry. And then in purple, we're seeing nitrous oxide, also used in both agriculture and industry. And they're put in carbon dioxide equivalents, since the different greenhouse gases trap different amounts of heat over time. And they're put in that equivalency so we can compare apples to apples. What are the relative contributions of these things? 2, trapping this heat in the atmosphere, creating that thick blanket around the Earth that is warming the Earth over time and creating all of this kind of chaos as we go. So if we did nothing more, we would end up in a future where we have 3.3 degrees Celsius of warming or 6 degrees Fahrenheit of warming. You can toggle these and switch whatever one you want to put on top here. And of course, we know the global goal is that we want to limit this to no more than 2 degrees of warming, striving as much as we can towards 1.5. So we want to keep it well below 2, and that's to avoid the absolute worst impacts for humanity that we would have a limited ability to adapt to. En-ROADS lets us explore what this world would look like. I'm not going to show it to you yet. I like to do this at the end. So what I want to do is I want to work collectively together with you to build one scenario of success where we can take that temperature down through a package of policy and climate action interventions. And then I want to explore the world where we were headed and the world that we've now created together in this simulated environment and see how much progress we're able to make in this simulated environment together. So over on the left-hand side of the bottom here, you're seeing decisions that we can make, interventions that we can make in terms of our energy supply. Where are we getting the energy we need? In the top center, you're seeing the end uses of that energy. How are we using that energy in transportations and buildings and industry? And the bottom, you're seeing growth factors. We have to make assumptions about future population growth, future economic growth. On the right-hand side, let me actually clear this. See that I had something in the background already done over here on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have interventions around carbon dioxide removal. So we've done what we can to prevent it going into the atmosphere, but then how can we take it out of the atmosphere? And of course, we have nature-based solutions for that, and we also have technological solutions. And then we have these other sources of greenhouse gases that are coming from agriculture, from waste, from industry, and those decisions that we're making about how much we deforest the land or not. So your job, and I was going to poll you to do this, and I don't know why the poll is working, is to tell me what climate solution do you think would make the biggest impact in time to make a difference? What's one climate solution you think might have the biggest impact in time to make a difference? Someone be brave and get us started, because you can't anonymously poll.
I'm going to say carbon price.
Okay, put a price on carbon. So what we'd be doing here with the top layer lever is we're putting $1 per ton price on the emissions from energy, from the energy sector, putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It's only on the emissions itself, not on the energy source. Do you know of a carbon price that you would like to try? Or does anyone have one they'd like to suggest that we try? Yes?
$185 a ton.
Okay, so specific. What's great about En-ROADS is you can be as specific as you'd like. So if we just swing if you swing any of these levers to the right in En-ROADS, you're saying, I'm implementing something that's going to encourage this thing. And if you're swinging it to the left, you're saying, I'm implementing something that's going to discourage it. But you can really drill in and you can really nerd out here. So we can be very specific. We can go into the advanced features of the carbon pricing lever, and we can put in your $185 a ton.
Is it $5? Is that the current price?
Yes. Okay. So again, it's because En-ROADS is a global model, we have to think about things in global averages, right? So if we think about a quarter of the world's emissions already covered by a carbon price, on average of about $20 a ton, US dollars a ton. So if we said, what if we spread that out and made a global average? What's the global average price on carbon? It would be $5 a ton. So there is a global average carbon price you can think of that's in place right now. So we're going to be adding.
That's in there is
Implement. Yes. Nothing. The whole idea behind En-ROADS is that you are going to test out what else is it that we need to do on top of what we've already done. So it's only implemented policy. It's not any projections. So we're going to make this 185. Before I do that, before I model it simulate it using the model, I want to test your mental models. So what does your gut tell you is going to happen to that 2100 temperature if I put $185 price on carbon? So we're at 3.3 degrees of warming now, trying to get it down to 2 or well below 2. I'm going to put $185 price on carbon. Give me for every tenth of a degree you think it's going to shave off, give me a finger. Is it 1/10, 2/10, 3/10? Is it a whole degree? Is it 2 degrees? What do you think? 5? So, okay, 5/10. 5/10. Mental model, 1/10. Okay, 10. So one full, 2/10, 1 full degree, 8/10, 1 full degree, a half a degree. Okay, a degree. Okay, so before we even do anything, we have a wide range of mental models in the room, and that's why we built En-ROADS, because when we use this with decision makers and we ask them this question, all over the place, right? So we want to be able to ground that gut feeling or that mental model in the best available science. All right, so we're going to do it. Let's see what happens. Ooh. You can replay this in En-ROADS, so I'm going to go ahead and replay so you can see what's happening here. You see the carbon price shooting up. It actually is going to come in slowly over time, over 10 years. You can mess around with this. You can be really specific about how long you want what the final price you want it to be, how long you want to implement it. You can be very specific, but that's what we have here. So we've shaved off. So those of you that were around, let's see, we shaved off, yeah. 6/10, so those of you that are around a half degree, we're the closest to.
Can I ask you a question? How
Yeah.
does this model take into account assumptions around feasibility? Like, if it's 155, like, nobody's going to actually adopt it, there will be a revolt. What, like, does it take that into account? I mean, because that influenced my answer is whether it was actually feasible. So is this just like an ideal world if we could implement
The model itself doesn't take that into account. The actual, we're doing that right here, right now. So the human element of this is having conversations and grounding those conversations in it, right? So it's not going to put political feasibility here. Of course, we know that carbon pricing is in place in 80 plus jurisdictions around the world. Wide range of pricing, even up to over $100 a ton of pricing. So we know it's already happening. We know it's already possible. But En-ROADS does help us explore the repercussions of this. So what is going to happen, for example, and this is what you would need to do in the classroom, like what is going to happen to the average price of energy to consumers? If we do nothing else, if the policy is just a straight, per ton tax on carbon, what would that do to the average price for energy consumers? Obviously, this is problematic, right? So what are ways in which carbon pricing can be implemented in the real world that also solve for the problem to protect consumers from that energy spike? Does anyone in the room have any thoughts or any ideas about that?
Put in more investments into research to bring down the cost of carbon capture.
Right, so we can also look at the revenue. Let's look at revenue and costs. We can also see the revenue that is being generated from a policy like this. And then one thing is take that revenue, reinvest it in the clean technologies that people, if they take, they're using those clean technologies and they become more accessible and more affordable, then they're not subject to the carbon price in the first place to pay it. That's one thing. Is there another way that anyone has heard of that you can introduce carbon pricing, or the way carbon pricing has been introduced in other parts of the world? Another way to alleviate costs for folks?
You recycle the revenue.
Recycle the revenue. So can you say more about that?
So I charge the tax, like Canada did for a while. You charge the tax.
Yep.
You create the economic effect of shifting high carbon fuels being more expensive, low carbon fuels being less expensive.
Yep.
But then everybody gets back a check for the equivalent amount that they paid in that tax.
Exactly right. So basically a fee and a dividend, or a fee and a rebate back to the people. This can be done on just a straight per capita basis. And if you think about it, the people on the lower end of the economic ladder have lower carbon footprints, will pay less carbon price to begin with. Folks on the higher end of the economic ladder, by and large, larger carbon footprints would pay a higher price in the beginning. Everyone gets back the same amount of money. So we even have research here and researchers at MIT that look at this, so that folks at the lower end and the middle of the economic ladder can actually make out on this transition. And then folks at the higher end who can arguably pay more would be paying something closer to the fair cost, or the fair, the impacts of that carbon being into the atmosphere. So that's just another policy mechanism. So En-ROADS helps you to explore something like the difficulty and the feasibility in having these conversations about how would we do fair and equitable policy implementation. Yes?
So I have a different version than Liz.
Okay.
But it's also about what's in the model. So if you had there's lots of people who would say if you have that carbon price, it's going to affect GDP, and that in a negative way. and that, of course, could itself reduce emissions. So is your emissions calculator incorporating the economic impacts of, for example, a shock like that to energy prices?
Well, yes to, oh, you mean to GDP?
Yeah.
No. Am I correct about that? It does. If he wasn't here, I'd be like, I'm not sure, I don't believe it does, and I'll find out for you. But obviously
when you don't know.
yes.
I knew John was in the room. It's
Yeah, so can you bring up?
Yes, it does. I know the positive thing that it shows, yes.
It's in the little.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have a climate damage function in the model, and of course that's hugely uncertain. So if you go into the assumptions, you can pick from a menu of the peer-reviewed studies on this, and you can choose your own adventure too. This graph shows that, well, let's see, you already implemented it.
Yeah, we've
That's fine.
We've made some progress.
So the dashed blue line is what real GDP per capita globally average would be if there were no further climate harms beyond what we've already experienced, right? We know that's not true. The solid black line is what actual GDP per capita would be in the base case, and that delta between those is the loss from climate damage, right? Extreme weather, crop yield decline, general instability, supply chain disruptions, all of that stuff as best estimated in these studies. The impact, so can you put the mouse over to 2020?
Oh yeah. Oh.
That's the climate harm, that little dip there, that's the climate harm from COVID. Any one of these damage functions shows that what's coming at us, this one's pretty conservative, I think way over optimistic. Vastly, it makes COVID look like a little blip. Now, it's not, to directly answer your question.
I was going to say, I think he asked it.
This is not a full macroeconomic model, computable general equilibrium kind of model that can handle those short-term disruptions. There's enormous debate about that. We'll put it in when we can, get a little more understanding of that, or when the science is there. But my sense, and I could be wrong, often am, is that those are actually pretty tiny compared to the magnitude of those losses from climate damage, especially in the out years. But not there right now.
Okay. What else do we want to try? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you know where the coal is being produced by in 2040? Or
Like geographically speaking? No. Because, again, it's a globally aggregated model, we will be able to look at some geographically specific climate impacts at the end. But no, this is not going to geographically show you where that's going to be produced.
is there a mathematical formula that the model does to show that coal is still viable in certain amounts, even though there's a $185 carbon?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of price, like how has the model calculated that?
So, do you want me to?
Sure.
The technical answer is there's a logit choice function which captures the heterogeneity in the local costs of each energy source and the heterogeneity in government and other policies. So coal is abundant around the world, and it's cheap if you only count its direct costs, not its environmental, social, and climate costs. And there's many governments in the world that are still subsidizing it heavily. So those are the ones in that little tail, even at $185. Now, which countries are those? It might change over time, but it's India, it's Indonesia, it's South Africa, it's Mongolia,
Sure, so it's assuming that those subsidies remain.
Unless you
pull the lever to take them off. You can do that.
Subsidies are now separate from taxes, and and you can take away the subsidies all by themselves for any of the fossil fuels and see what impact it makes, because they're all subsidized on average now.
And so what we, go ahead.
Can I just say very quickly, because I have taught this model many times, and both the questions are the exact same answer. The model doesn't do the distributional effects, which is actually what the classroom discussion and the discussion is about. Because while the general equilibrium model on GDP is going to say that it all just flattens out, which every general equilibrium model does, you could have a massive loss in utilities, in real estate, with a massive gain in tech. Or you could have have a massive loss in South African coal producers with a massive gain in Australian ones. It doesn't tell you all that, but
Right.
that's because I see this all the time.
Yep.
When we start talking about what the model has and doesn't have,
Yep.
whereas actually that's the whole point of the conversation is
Mhm.
you have to figure out then what would that mean for a geography, a sector, an investor, a country, that kind of stuff. Does that sound right to you?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And just another note that you just reminded me of is like we just implemented a carbon price that is going to impact anything that is emitting, and it's going to impact it more depending on how much it emits. So if we look at what happened here in the okay, it went away. If we looked what happened here when we did this, and we replay it, let's do this large. We're seeing all of the emitting sources of energy get a squeeze, right? But we're seeing it more with coal because coal just produces the most amount of emissions, per unit of energy it's making. So this policy isn't like necessarily picking winners or losers, and it also encourages innovation. So if we looked like specifically, for example, at coal, primary energy demand. Oh, that's not coal. Coal. What we'll also see happen here on the topic of coal is that here's where we were, and you can see coal used for fuel and electric and used to make hydrogen. But what you'll see appear on the scene as we implemented a carbon price is now not only do we have using much, much less coal around the world, we also see the advent of fuel and electric uses of coal with carbon capture and storage technology on them, because we've created that strong financial incentive for them to figure out that problem and solve that problem, because if they can solve it, then they wouldn't be subject to the carbon price. So that's also an important difference in not individually going after one single source, but putting a price on the problem, which is the emissions from the source. What else do we want to try? Nuclear. Okay. So what we're going to do here, let me go back to the original graphs. So what we're going to do here is we can strongly, do you want to encourage or discourage? You want to encourage. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it cheaper, essentially, to create more energy from nuclear. You can think of that as a subsidy. You could think of it as reducing regulations and burdens that would be, financially beneficial to make it cheaper to do this. And so we'll go ahead and we'll max this out. We'll put a really strong financial incentive that's going to make this much cheaper. So again, mental model check. We're at 2.7 degrees. Show of hands. What's your mental model telling you about how many tenths of a degree you think we're going to shave off if we go real hard on nuclear? 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 5, almost a whole degree, 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths. Okay, so we have anything from 1 tenth to 9 tenths of a degree, I saw. So again, pretty broad range of mental models in the room. Let's go ahead and do it, and let's see what happens. The 1 tenths of a degree have it. You can see what's happening here.
Right, but we've already got a carbon price.
Yep, so yes.
So that would be different if we didn't have a carbon price.
Correct. So the order in which you do things, and it's kind of reflective of the real world, right? We already have this strong policy that's already creating an incentive for nuclear. So we already had growth in nuclear before we even did that. So then on top of that, we're also saying really strong on nuclear on top of that. So that's a great point to make. And you can mess around with En-ROADS, open up a new window, do a different scenario, do things in a different order, and see what their relative contribution could be depending when you make that intervention in the system. Important to note here, so you can see that what we have now around the world, so if you look in the bottom right, nuclear primary energy demand around the world, we've increased this almost by 6-fold. So this is a massive amount of new nuclear plants all over the world. So this is very, very strong. It's everywhere. So I just want to make that point that what we did is pretty significant. But still, it had only 1 tenth of a degree. Now, some of you nailed that, but some of you thought it was going to be higher. Yes?
Just curious if this is assuming only Gen 3 nuclear, or if there's a capacity for the model to think about Gen 4 and emerging technologies that haven't quite commercialized yet.
Yes. So what we're doing now is what we already have, but we have a new zero carbon lever here, where we can explore something like breakthrough in the lab tomorrow with nuclear fusion. So we're just talking about current fission technology that we have today. So was there another question about this? Okay. So for those of you who thought this was going to be much stronger, and even if we could open up a new window and do it by itself, but what are some of the reasons why it's not as big of an impact? Well, of course, there's time delays in the system. So of course, nuclear is going to take time to develop and actually build. You can go into the baseline assumptions of the model and you can challenge and change what we say about that. But you hear people saying it's going to take decades. It's actually 6 years we have. And you can change that. You can be more optimistic. You can be more pessimistic. That's the flexibility of En-ROADS. So we know it takes time in the system. We know we're only creating electricity from this by and large. And so that's not necessarily going to deal with the fact that we still have fuels that we have to replace in the system, so it's only working on electricity. By subsidizing this, we're making energy a little cheaper than it just was, and of course that means that we would consume more of that energy, so you can use En-ROADS to explore all of these things. And there's one other thing I wanted to say, but it's drawing a blank. Any questions on this before we try the next policy? All right, the clock is ticking, and we got to get that temperature down. We're at 2.6 degrees. What do you want to try?
Building electrification.
Okay, electrification in buildings. So we can do, we have this top lever of the top layer of the levers that we can do, and of course you can also drill in and you can be more specific about how you want to do this. So we could just look at subsidizing new equipment that could then run on electricity. We could also do this, once you drill in, it's not just electricity, it's for hydrogen as well. We can also do something like put a fuel-powered equipment sales limit. So actually phase this out and say, by this year, only this percentage of new equipment can be fuel-based instead of electricity. So why don't we do a test with that? I'll go really strong on that. And we will reduce the amount of new equipment that can run on fuels. What does our mental model think? Give me show of hands. 3, 4, 4/10, 4/10, 3/10. 1. Okay. We got some people are getting like people who had higher, they're starting to get smaller. They started with this and now they're like maybe 1. All right, so let's go ahead and be pretty aggressive with that. The ones have it. So one of the things to think about here is that we're talking about new equipment, right? And so En-ROADS would let you explore. Let's see, all of my stars are gone on all of my graphs. My favorites are all gone, but here we go. We can look at sales and we can look at existing. So we can look at the difference between new sales and then what is the existing capital stock that is out there in the world. And so En-ROADS really helps you see the time delays in the system. So if we're looking at things that are running on electricity and we see that we made this big spike here, we could look out and say, well, how long did it take for, let's say, to get to 60% in sales, and you can see that's in 2028. But then if you say, okay, 60% of the actual existing stock out here, now we're out in 2037. So we can see that delay. We're putting all the new clean stuff out there that can run on electricity, but there's a delay in what's already out there still running on fuels. And then of course, everything that we're doing, we're still running it on electricity. And if we're still creating electricity, right, if we look at our home graphs, we still have coal, we still have gas in there, right? We're still creating, we don't have 100% clean electricity that we're running it on either. What else do we want to, do we have any questions or what else do we want to try? We're at 2.5, we gotta get it down. We gotta get it down. In the back. Reduce coal further?
Yeah.
Okay, how would you like to do that? We got a strong price on carbon. What else would you like to do? We could.
I would try to penalize its user.
Okay, so if we were going to penalize it, put stronger regulations on it, make it more expensive. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, and for the sake of time, I'm just going to use the top lever. As I pull this lever, we're going to first pull off global subsidies, and then we're going to start to put a tax on the fuel source itself. We're already taxing emissions, but now it's the source itself. So let's see what happens when we do that. What's your mental model say? I'll go really strong on that. Strongly discourage it. 0.3 of a degree. 1. Oh, we got a whole degree. Nothing. Zip. That's my first zip. Okay. 0.2. 0.2. All right, let's do it. Let's see what happens. Oh, zip. Now, if we put the two things to notice. You can always put the cursor over here and you'll see hundredths of a degree, so we're at 2.48. And then we did this and we're at 2.46, so 2/100ths of a degree. But remember, we're making the source more expensive. We already went after the emissions. En-ROADS does let you explore things like, what if we accelerated plant retirement? What if we reduced utilization of current plants? So you can actually go there and do that as well. But just already putting that financial disincentive on it on top of an already financial disincentive, like where are we in the model? What have we already simulated? We've already put the carbon price on. That's really important to keep. So look where we are. Look what the, like, here's the emissions. We have been working on that big gray piece. Like we've been doing pretty good, cutting that big kind of gray chunk, right? What haven't we done yet? What might we want to think about if we're thinking about a package of policies to solve this problem?
Nature-based. They say energy efficiency, because we have, usually they say to start with energy efficiency.
Ah, yeah.
Before you start investing in other things.
Great. So let's do a quick test there, and then let's do some nature-based. Yep. Okay. So you bring up an interesting point, and this is what's really helpful for En-ROADS, and I'm going to start going faster because of the time. So we have buildings and industry, and we have transport, so we can do them one by one. I'm going to let you just do your mental model, and I'll go strong on buildings and industry, and then I'll go strong on transportation. So just think for a second, what do you think is going to happen? And we'll do that. So we're at 2.5. So buildings go really strong. Another 1/10 of a degree, another 1/10 of a degree. Every 1/10 of a degree matters, so that's important. But you made a really important point. So if I go here and open another En-ROADS scenario, right? So here we are. We'll clear all the policies. And we'll say, well, what if we just out of the gate right now did that? Sooner rather than later, what are we going to see happen? We're at 3.3. Just take a moment to think of how you're feeling about that. So here we go. 3/10 and a little bit more. So it has more of an impact out the gate because the energy mix, we haven't done anything else to clean up the energy mix. And we're like, while we get to that and clean that energy mix up, let's go as strong and as fast as we can with just using less energy to begin with, not in a conservation sense, like same level of comfort in the building, same lighting, right? Still getting from point A to point B. Let's just do it using less energy. So En-ROADS helps to show you how doing that sooner rather than later is more powerful, impactful than putting that off. So that's an important point to make. But we did shave off 2 more 1/10. But it's not enough. Nature-based solutions. Well, I'll pull the top lever here. We're looking at both, we're looking at 3 things. We're looking at massive tree planting. You can do each of these tests separate in En-ROADS. We're going to do massive tree planting. We're going to encourage agricultural soil carbon sequestration. And we're also going to encourage biochar as nature-based solutions. We'll go strong on that. We're at 2.3. Where do we think we're going to land? Let's do a show of fingers for this. 1/10, 1/10. 3/10, 3/10, 2/10. Okay, so somewhere between 0 and 3/10. So we'll do that. 2/10. So we see the green area for the first time. We're making movements here, and you see it, land use, carbon dioxide going from being a source of emissions to being a sink here as we move towards the end of the century. And so every 1/10 of a degree matters, and that's more progress towards our goal. Now, of course, there's delays in the system for why that is not. Sometimes people say, let's just plant 1 trillion trees and then we'll be all sorted, like high-level policymakers say this. There's delays in that system. It takes time, and you can look at this in En-ROADS. It takes time to find the land. Actually, let's look at the land.
Take into account that wildfires are increasing, so you do nature-based solutions, but
yes.
Fires
yes.
going down,
yes.
So you're,
yes.
I feel like in the
it does.
Baseline, like, is it really going to improve?
It does. It does incorporate that now. It didn't always.
Wildfire.
Yeah. Yes, so we can look at that as an impact.
But that feedback is in the model in both ways, right?
Yeah.
Fire risk goes up as it's warmer. Fires put CO2 in the atmosphere, which makes it even warmer, and that's a nasty, vicious cycle. That's in the model.
Like Canada's not going to meet their goals because there's been so many wildfires now.
Right. Yeah, so look at Canada for a second, and this is like a little, we're more than halftime, but where are we, where we were in the baseline scenario?
Yeah, okay. Put the map year to 2020, which is close to where we are today.
Here we are today.
And then click
baseline.
So that's sort of where we are today. And in the baseline, if you now slide that over to 2100, that's the increase in the number of high wildfire danger days per year everywhere. And it's
Very depressing.
It's really scary, right? It's gonna make
But we're making,
in LA look like a backyard barbecue.
but look, we're already making progress. So if you see the changes in the color of the map, that's the difference between where we started and now we've layered in these policies and we're getting closer to our goal. And we're seeing in massive swaths of Canada, those danger days being cut in more than half.
Canada, the whole world.
Yeah. We can do this. And you can zoom in or zoom out to any part in the world and you can see
So
massive
this
change.
is highly, highly uncertain because the fires are somewhat stochastic, but on average, you plant a lot of trees, you do a lot of afforestation, and those trees, unless you do a lot of other things too, are at high risk of burning.
And En-ROADS can also show you, just to finish that thought, of how much land are we talking, like how much land do we need to find around the world to do these nature-based solutions. So here you're seeing this gray dotted line is showing you that's the area of the size of the country of India. So we're looking at like 2.5 Indias that we need to find to do what we just simulated in the system. Time delays, getting that land, securing that land. For the trees, planting those saplings. Those saplings are going to take many, many decades to grow, big canopies to actually absorb. So En-ROADS helps you explore those delays in the system. We're at 2.1, we're almost there. Yes?
I just had a question on that. I know it's not an integrated assessment model, but I'm curious if there's any information that you can gather on, say, food prices when you increase nature-based solutions?
Yeah, we don't have food prices tracked in the model. You can look at like changes, and so there's a whole panel here that you can explore that's land, forestry, and food. So you can look at like farmland area, crop yield, like you can look at some factors, but the actual like price to consumers of food is not yet in the model, but that would be a great one to include.
There's an assumption we've made that we know is over-optimistic, which is that as the population grows and as their affluence and appetite for meat grow, which is an assumption you can change, and as the productivity of croplands goes down from climate damage, that technological improvements in crop yields will, with a lag, rise to make sure nobody's starving. That's clearly not the case. But there isn't enough good science to say how many people are going to starve to death, how many climate migrants are there going to be, how much civil and international conflict is going to be as a result of that. So it's something we want to have come out based on questions like yours in the conversation, but nobody can model that right now.
What else do we want to try?
Ag emissions.
Ag?
Yeah.
Great.
And waste at the same time if you can, but.
Yeah, well, we can do them. We'll do them. We'll be a good scientist, as John says. We'll do them one at a time. So here, you can be really specific about, do I want to look at livestock? Do I want to look at crops? Do I want to look at what John was just referring to, the percent of our food that we're getting from animals, the percent of our food that we're wasting, so particular to waste, food waste in particular, all lives in this lever, but for the sake of time, we're going to just really encourage those things sort of across the board. So again, mental model check, we're at 2.1. Do you think we're going to get there? We're going to get it under 2. We're going to get at 2. We got some thumbs up. We think we're going to get it to 2 here, right? And this graph is showing you, remember, where those emissions are coming from. So we'll go ahead and do that. Another 1/10 of a degree. So let's take, we got it to 2. We still have time to get it. We still have time to get it well below 2, but we have got it to 2 in a simulated environment. And I want to note at this point, now this is not always the case in every workshop, but at this point we got it down to 2 degrees, and we have not introduced any sort of new technological breakthrough. We got this done with what we already have, aggressively deploying what we already have. So that is of note. Do we want to shave off a little bit more? Let's do this. You want to do the waste and go over to the waste? Transport? Great. So we already looked at efficiency, so we can do transport, electrification, we can explore hydrogen. There's all sorts of things that we can do here. We can also do what we did with the buildings, where we just look at what about a policy that, again, starts to limit road and rail transportation, and how much of that can be fuel powered versus electric powered. So let's just go strong on that. Mental model check. Do it in your own head, and we'll go ahead and do that. So we probably got from that, let's see, let's go back. We were at 1.98. Let's go forward. 1.96. So 2 more tenths. So we've already made things super, super efficient, and we've already cleaned up the energy a lot, but we still have oil in the system. We're reducing that oil in the system. That didn't get to that problem of the capital stock that's already out there. So I could do the same side by side with sales, right? New and what's out there, getting that out of the system. And then also air and water. You can explore air and water separately in En-ROADS. So we just did road and rail, and we didn't do anything to, maybe you turn in those old cars and you get new, cleaner cars, and get those old cars off the road and out of the used car market. Yeah.
With a higher kind of renewable energy mix, does the model assume that like economic growth is decoupled from emissions, or like does the model still assume that if you increase economic growth, like emissions or energy will increase, and how does that?
So I'm sorry, you got to say that one more time.
What's the kind of link between economic growth and temperature increase, and how have you guys modeled that?
Yeah, so that's the damage function. So we, yeah.
You can.
So let's look at
GDP per capita.
temperature, and then let's look at population GDP per capita.
You get to choose which damage function you want, and there's tremendous uncertainty in the literature here. Personally, I think the one we're using here, which is widely cited, is over-optimistic, that damage is going to be worse. Some studies, a lot worse. But choose your own adventure.
Yes, and as a user, you can go into, just to show you quickly, again, because this is a really cool feature in En-ROADS, that you can go and drill into the assumptions. You can look at the economic impact of climate change. You can choose one of the other peer-reviewed studies that are out here to select from. You can create your own damage function, right? You can maybe want to test something in between two. You can do that here, or you could, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could turn it off. You could say like, there would be no damage, but we know that there's already damage. So, but it has the flexibility that you can look at different scenarios.
Discount rate.
Yep, you can do that as
Tell
well.
you what the social cost of carbon is,
Mm-hmm.
and what the NPV of the lost GDP is. But you get to choose the social discount rate. That's, of course, also highly contentious.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more asking about the other way around. So the economic growth impacts to this. So for example, this is about climate change impacting economic growth, but like what about just the economy?
Well, so the bigger, the larger the GDP, gross world product, the more energy demand there is, the more investment in energy production and consuming capital. And so unless you do something to further reduce emissions, the more emissions you're going to have and the more warming you're going to have. Now, to the point Mike made earlier, we do sometimes have folks say, well, why don't we just slow down economic growth? And there's a lever there in the middle bottom right where you can do that. There's no constituency, no government, no company in the world wants to deliberately slow economic growth. And also, by the way, that's the theory that says cancer cures smoking. Right? Kill the economy, we're going to reduce climate change. Sure, that's not what we want to do. We want to have a prosperous economy where people's basic needs are met and people have economic opportunity and education and healthcare, and all the things that make for well-being. And climate change is making that harder and harder. So let's not. Middle school kids will do this, right? Slow down the economy. Nobody wants to do that. It will lower warming.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question, which is, do you allow people so much flexibility to play with the parameters? Do you then caveat that somehow in the model where then, a little disclaimer pops up, which is this is highly unrealistic, like you probably shouldn't do this.
No, because that's not like.
One person's unrealistic is somebody else is gonna happen tomorrow.
Yeah. And when we use this with decision makers, like it's really important to us to be completely policy neutral and really just let them drive it. Like we're not coming in there to say, we built this great tool and we're going to use it to show you the pathway that we think is the best and the most optimized for X, Y, and Z, and this is what you should do, because they don't like being told what to do. They like to be able to learn for themselves, and we find that that's just an alternative to some of the more traditional ways that we communicate with decision makers on this issue. So yeah, we want to let them duke that out. Yeah, there's another one over here.
Can you or John talk about how the conversation unfolds in a classroom? Because on the one hand, I could imagine like students might get very excited to say, oh, we just have to do these things and then we'll solve it, without having the appreciation perhaps in that classroom, depending on the students, about like the political difficulty and the geographic and geospatial differences and all these impacts that might make people in the classrooms who are taking this feel
Yeah.
pretty good. But then
I don't use it in the classroom. He uses it in the classroom.
I have to go
Yep.
and set up for the
Yep.
plenary where I'm gonna be doing this a little bit focused on AI. And so then Crystal can correct me and contradict me. So the way we usually do it is not like this.
Yeah.
We do it like this. But the best way to do it is, and you've seen this, at least with early versions of our model, you run it as a climate negotiation. I do it right next door in the flat classroom there. There's like 9 delegations. You're the fossil fuel industry. You're the clean tech industry. You're the developing countries. You're the rich, affluent countries. And they have to negotiate face to face and come up with proposals for which there's enough support for us to pull the lever, and then they get immediate real-time feedback on what's likely to happen. My experience is nobody ever pulls up, reaches an agreement where we can pull enough levers and 1.5 degrees. Hey, fantastic, let's go to the bar. That never ever happens.
No.
It's very hard. The first round of negotiation, you might go 3.3 to 2.7. That would be fairly typical. That's nowhere close to good enough. Then we show them, or they see for themselves why that's bad and who's going to lose. And then we'll do another round, and if necessary, a third round. So, we're talking 3.5
3.5 hours.
ideally, and half a day.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't get under 2. When it does happen, which is most of the time, without any prompting from us, there's an internal endogenous shift at some point from the initial distributed bargaining frame where if you win, I'm losing, to an integrated frame where we're all in this together and we have to compromise and figure out how to share the gains so that, like the rebate on the carbon price. That's much more typical. We have, 4 or 5 peer-reviewed papers now that evaluate the impact of these interactive workshops. So I can send them to you, Mike, and I guess we can send them to anybody if you email Crystal.
Yep. Provide all of that for you. Yep.
And, it doesn't always work. The day after Trump was elected the first time, I was running it in Morocco with a group of university students from all over Africa. And I always have people play the roles of folks that are most different from their real life. And I had this young woman from, I can't remember, some sub-Saharan African country, and she was President Trump, President-elect Trump, and she wouldn't budge 1 inch on anything. I mean, it was...
Yeah.
And people were yelling at her and screaming, but she stuck to her Trump role really, really well, and it was hard. It was really, really difficult. That's when the learning happens. Anyway,
I forgot to mention.
No,
I'm not going to contradict. That was perfect, and I don't use it in the classroom. But that reminded me. For some of you were in the earlier session, we were talking about applications in higher ed, and one of the things that we do at MIT is like for all the new incoming MBAs, for example, it takes a lot of time and energy, but we look at where are you all coming from? What are you going into? And we purposely figure out how to put you in a negotiating group to play a role that would be a little bit uncomfortable for you.
Last summer, like everybody, about 1,000 incoming first-year MIT students, including essentially all the Sloan students in all of our programs, plus maybe 300 of the incoming undergraduates, all did En-ROADS in different events in August.
Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yep.
So when you're doing with
the students, do they have their own computers so they can kind of play with all of this stuff? And then they're kind of negotiating with each other, but then you're managing like the main, like what the...
Yes, the faculty is usually playing the UN Secretary General, so the faculty also get in the role, and when they come up, they have to do their pitch of like what they would like to see, and they get to vote like, this is what we want to have done. They can also ask to repeal what another group has just done, so their wish can be not to add and like pull another lever, but like unpull the lever of another group. So they come up and they say it, and then yes, we manage we keep the score, but they can open their laptops and their tablets and mess around with things and figure out and strategize and all of that. So yes.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
I generally discourage them from going into the tool. You can't block them, right? Like the tool is so accessible, but I try to discourage them from just kind of going in and gaming out all the scenarios on it, and rather have them basically read their role cards and embody their roles with some uncertainty about what's going to happen when you pull a lever. I think you get a little bit more impact in the plenary sessions if they haven't gamed it out as much. So I try to not share the link in advance or things like that.
Yeah, we don't share it in advance ever, but yeah.
But obviously they
I'm
will
just
pull
thinking
it.
Pros and
there's
cons,
so much detail in
Yeah, yeah.
there, like...
And some of them will pull it up, and it is good to let them go into like the detailed settings and see all the policy levers that they can pull. I just try to avoid having them like try them all. You know what I mean?
Let's spend some time exploring this new world that we've just created together. So I said at the outset, I didn't want to show you the status quo world. I wanted to actually make the world better and then explore. So let's look at things like, so we started, one of the impacts that we did end up looking at together was this GDP per capita. So you can see that we've pulled up, that black line is the baseline, the blue line is the world we're creating together, and we pulled that line up much closer to where the world would be if there were no impacts from climate. So that's huge. Doesn't mean that there's no impacts, but we've made it much more safer, much more healthier, much more prosperous. We looked at wildfire danger days, so we can see where we're at now with those. This was one of our mapping tools. Again, we can drill into any part of the world, but you can just see here the baseline. And when we're drilling into a part of the world and we're seeing that color change, we're looking at the change in wildfire danger days. So in some cases, we're changing that color and cutting it in half or more to the number of days that people would be in danger. We can look at, let's do some more impacts that aren't necessarily mapped, but might be interested, like different constituencies will be more interested in.